Hello everybody, it's me, and we're back again to make another pot. We've been making these sort of floral pots for the past couple days, and that's what we're just gonna be keep making more. This one, I tried to do some fancy stuff, and I didn't think it really turned out that great, but it's stuff that I always think that you should try things. I mean, I'll talk to you guys about some of the troubles that I'm having with the pots when we get there. And I can maybe just touch a little bit on it now, but the top is just really hard to manage when the bottom is getting a little bit thinner. And so I had a pot later in the day that I made that actually it worked out pretty okay, where I kept the bottom thicker, then I worked on the top and sort of finalized the top, and then I could go back and edit it afterwards. And so that's sort of what I did with that, and I think it actually turned out pretty okay. Um, Also, when you're trying to get pretty narrow, things can get a little bit wacky, and so I think that's another thing I need to work on is maybe trying to get it into almost like a pyramid shape, and then editing the top, and then going and leaving the top enough where I can put my hand in, and then finishing out the bottom. And so we'll be trying that maybe tomorrow. And if you see any of my shorts, you'll see I made a little bit of a larger pot using the same style, and I think it turned out pretty okay. But here we go for our first poll. It's pretty good. I think a lot of times with the first poll that I've been doing a little bit recently is I'm actually bringing it too far to the center. Sometimes I think uh, you'll feel it when you're centering that bottom part. Once you get closer to the top, all of a sudden the pressure, where the pressure is located between your fingers, shifts when you get about halfway up on that first pole. And so I think it's really important to try to keep you feel like you want to lift, right? Don't lift. Actually, like, kind of press down, like hold your tension downwards, and as you're doing that, it can make the pull a lot easier for that first one, because a lot of times that first pull can get some uncentered clay at the top, and I've noticed that quite a bit on these sort of pots, and uh, it's just not the best. See, I got a little bit wild on that top part right there, so we're gonna color it in. And I think what I just said about throwing that first pole can be taken into a lot of poles. It's so important to keep that tension down, like aimed downwards. That's a good way to think about it, aiming it, right? It's not the actual like motion that you're doing, because you are going upwards, but you want to be aiming downwards, right? And so I think it's a good metaphor. I'm going a little bit slower and a little bit wider to try to get rid of some of that uncentered clay. It's still there, and now we had to shift our grip on that top part just because it's getting a little bit too tall to keep that same bottom half grip. Usually I use a sponge, but recently my sponge has been just so full of clay, so it's not really good for taking or transferring water on the top of a pot. I really like to just keep maybe I should just have two sponges, like a clay filled throwing sponge and then a water transfer sponge, because you can see I get so much water kind of not even in the splash pan and just on the wheel base, and it sort of gets a little bit wacky. You can see too, every time I try to work on that top, it's starting to kick out. And so it's really it's the whole pot, like once you start putting too much tension on that top part, it's torquing the bottom, right? It's like every time you're doing something, because you have so much weight that's vertical now. There's not a lot of weight on that bottom that's keeping it there. But we're going to go right into our drastic pulls. I did 5 this time. Did it really slow, and I was like, you know what? Like, let's see, how this goes, right? And I think it went okay. It actually looks really mangled when it has like 5. I think when there's 4, it's a little bit calmer, right? There's a little bit more room for the eye to settle on some of these areas. But when I did this, it almost looks like You ever make those water bottle air guns where you twist a water bottle full of air up into like a almost like that twist, like you literally twist it around, and all of a sudden you let the bottle pop off and it go poof. I got that vibe from this a little bit. And right here you can see where the things didn't really go too well. This top part, I actually like the way that it's collapsing. Like that's really beautiful and elegant, but I was trying to make like these little mini collapses, but the clay is just too thick and I can't be editing it when it gets that tall. And so I still think it's okay. It adds like maybe some glaze will settle in there and cause something interesting to happen, but the pot's not bad at all. And we just did our little flap. I think I specifically like right here this moment of the two but not going all the way up, and then there's like a link to the top there, like where that drastic pull sort of bleeds into that top part. Like there's definitely some good moments in the pot, but just not exactly what you want. There's also a nice little cavern in there. Maybe something interesting can happen in there with the glaze. But you can sort of see that this pot, it just doesn't have the strength of some of the other pots that I've made. There's a couple of things that I mean by strength, like actual structure strength, because the collapse and after the collapse happens, trying to work on that top is so difficult. But also strength with the way this pot looks. Like it doesn't look like it's strong or sturdy or like purposeful. It looks a little bit more happenstance, and it's okay. Like it's really important to have these sorts of pots in context with other pots, right? Very easy, these pots can be written off as like really not that great visually, right? Or some of the more bad pots, but you really need to have these things. That's the thing I think I've learned most about my ceramics in particular, is that the way a pot can change when another pot is next to it is amazing. Oh my gosh. And so I think it's something that everybody should explore at least. Just take some of your pots or take some of your art or any type of work that you do and then just pit it up against some of your other stuff, right? Like it doesn't even have to be like an actual physical object. Maybe take a mentality that you're thinking through, right? And then pit it up against a mentality that you've been doing, right? And so you can sort of like work through these and pull yourself through these ideas. And I think at the very end of all these things that we sort of compete with ourselves. And I think that's really important. There's a thing of Kobe Bryant. They're like, you know, who do you compete with? Or I'm butchering the thing, but he said, the only competition I like have is with myself, right? Like once you can get to that point, once you can sort of have these dialogues with yourself, with whatever you're doing, you're in a golden spot. And with that, I'll let you guys go. All the best and strong mentality. Peace.